back to Between the Hashes. We hope you enjoyed our last video where we went over our predictions for the AFC North. For this video, we'll be going over our game-by-game predictions for the AFC South. And we are going to start off with the Tennessee Titans.
All right, so everyone knows Titans had a surprising playoff. Went deep in the playoffs last year. They went to the AFC Championship. Surprisingly, no one expected that. They came in as a 6th seed and upset Tom Brady and the Patriots, and then the Ravens, both on the road. Everyone knows they're carried by Derrick Henry, who has emerged as a top 5, if not top 3 running back in this NFL. Their key additions and bringbacks are obviously Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, their quarterback from midway through last year, and Vic Beasley Jr. Their key losses are Dion Lewis, Jack Conklin, Marcus Mariota, and their failed pick, Tajay Sharp. So they've been a very mediocre team the last few years, finishing with the same record for 4 years in a row. The first game they're playing against the Broncos on the road. I think they're going to lose this one.
That's a primetime game also, Monday Night Football.
Yes, it is. Now, against the Jaguars at home, first home game of the year, I think it's an easy win for them, as the Jaguars are not a very strong team at home. Home fans are going to be pumped. At the Vikings now, again on the road, a hard team to face. I think they're going to pick up a loss in this one. Had a little bit of a shaky start in the first 3 games. Then they're going to play the Steelers at home. The Steelers, as we discussed in the last episode, as a 10-6 team, really beating some of these top-tier teams and having a great year with Big Ben. But I think the Titans are going to come away with this one as Derrick Henry in the run game is going to be too much. And then they go on to they're going to stay at home to face the favorite out of the AFC East, the Buffalo Bills, and I think they're going to lose this one. It's going to be a close-fought game. Both teams have good rush defenses. Both teams have good rush games in total. I think the Bills are going to overcome this game. Now against the Texans at home again for the 3rd straight game. I think they're going to come away with a win for this one after a tough, close game against the Bills. They're going to rebound. And you got the Bengals on the road. I think they're also going to win this game. Right now, the Bengals have really bad front 7, and Derrick Henry's going to overpower them. Now, at home again against the Bears, it's a really flip-flap kind of game. Khalil Mack and them, they have a great defense over there. I think this could be a trap game of sorts after 2 big wins, and they're going to pick up a loss here at home against the Bears. Now I think they're, again, at home against the Colts, and I think, again, they're going to, as we discussed, or as we will discuss, the Colts are, again, a very good team after a great offseason, and I think they're going to win this game, so the Titans are going to lose this game. Oh, add that part out. The Titans are going to lose this game at home against the Colts. Then they're going to go to face the Ravens on the road, and they're going to pick up a loss there as Baltimore is too strong, especially on the road, and it's going to be their toughest point of the year as they pick up 3 straight losses, 2 of them against good teams. One of them is kind of like a trap game. I think they're going to be angry. They're going to come up with a lot of grit and heart, and Derrick Henry especially is going to start to carry his weight here after some down weeks. They're going to beat the Colts in Indianapolis after losing to them the first time. Then they're going to beat the Browns at home. The Jaguars again, I think, again, they're not as strong as the Titans, and they're going to sweep them with another win here in Jacksonville. And then against the Lions, their easiest stretch of the year right here, they're going to beat them at home. Now, I think this is a really tough game here because they're sitting in the playoff picture, in the hunt. It's hard to tell here. In Green Bay, it's a primetime game. Both teams are going to be in similar positions, fighting for playoff spots, fighting for division leads. I think Aaron Rodgers and company are going to be too strong here on the road, and they're going to pick up a loss here. Now, the last game of the season, it's a big game. Right now, they're sitting at 8-7, so it's either going 8-8 or miss the playoffs, or 9-6 and hope you can get into the playoffs. I think they're come away with the win in this game and sweep the Texans this year and finish with a final record of 9-7 for, yes, the 5th straight year.
Wait, Jake, can they see that?
See what?
Is 9-7 visible for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, for me it's not. Okay. No, you go cut back. Go ahead.
Hmm?
No, I was saying, do you have anything to say now? Because I'm going to say something. Do you have something to say?
No, you can. You can go first. I'll see if I want to add anything.
Okay. So I know Jake kind of talked about divisional play earlier. You noticed you have the Titans sweeping the Texans and sweeping the Jaguars, and then splitting with the Colts. So that's 5-1 in the division. That's really key when it comes to performing well, but also means that they really have them struggling outside of the division this year.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be really interesting to see how Ryan Tannehill performs. You know, the Titans really relied on Derrick Henry last year, and the Titans just signed Ryan Tannehill to an extension. So that'll be an interesting development this year.
And along with that big division record of 5-1, obviously the playoff tiebreaker is in conference wins. So they're taking that big divisional outburst of going 5-1 and taking that to a total of an 8-4 record in conference, which is a good record to have. It's a good tiebreaker just in case, because they're 9-7 to fall into that range of, with the 2 episodes ago in the first episode, the Chargers are also 9-7, so it's going to be interesting to see if they fall in the same tiebreaker as them, and we'll see how that adds up.
So the last 2 years, Derrick Henry has been good in the beginning of the season and has really picked it up towards the end of the season. Really carried the Titans both years into the playoffs. And last year, he carried the Titans past just being in the playoffs and into the AFC Championship. So how much do you see them relying on Derrick Henry, and do you see him following a similar trajectory where he starts to pick it up towards the end of the season?
I think so, definitely. I stated a little bit earlier how right after these 2 losses against Indianapolis and Baltimore, he's going to really start to have his really nice stretch where he just goes off. And previously, as we've seen, especially last year and also in before some years, the second game, for some reason, the second game against the Jaguars, he always just goes off for a crazy game. That's right in the middle of that stretch where they went 4 in a row, and he starts to build up to that game and takes it past in the next 3 games, which is why I think the Packers game is so big. It's going to be a close game because Henry's going to be at his peak. Rodgers is going to be at his peak. I do think that early in the season they're going to rely on Tannehill a little more because everyone's saying, oh, Tannehill, all he does is hand off the ball, and Derrick Henry's their workhorse. He's going to run the ball 35, 40 times a game. So I think they're going to try to prove that wrong, but they're going to realize that that's not the best strategy for the team. And right after that Ravens game, he's going to start to pick it up big time. All
So
right,
we're going to move on to the Texans.
Okay, so I would start with the key additions, but you can't really talk about the Tech offseason without talking about the biggest loss of DeAndre Hopkins, where made a questionable trade with the Cardinals. Many see them as the losing team in that deal, where they traded DeAndre Hopkins in a 4th-round pick for running back David Johnson, 2nd-round pick, and a 4th-round pick. So they essentially traded DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, who had a very bad year, a very disappointing year, and a 2nd-round pick. And for arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, definitely top 3. I don't see that as gaining enough, as David Johnson will probably be the starting running back, or at least platooning, but he did have an off year and he's kind of a question mark. So they did try to fill the receiving corps with new additions, Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb, along with signing cornerback Bradley Roby. So the main question for the Texans this year is how much will the loss of DeAndre Hopkins affect them, as him and Deshaun Watson were a dynamic duo together, and they were a main reason that the Texans have been a playoff team recently. And even though they added a couple wide receivers, they definitely aren't DeAndre Hopkins, and we don't know how Deshaun Watson will work with them. And along with that questions on that side of the ball, they were not a great defensive team last year, as they were 28th in the league and yards allowed per game and 23rd in the league in points allowed per game, which is bottom third in the league in both categories. Not very good. And although they added Bradley Roby, they didn't do much to improve on that side of the ball, along with the loss of Hopkins. And they did make the playoffs last year, but they did not really improve. When you look at the first 4 games of their schedule, it's pretty rough. And you're playing 4 teams that definitely playoff picture. Definitely, like, all teams could be even considered Super Bowl contenders in some people's eyes. So you have the first game of the NFL season against the Chiefs, and I just don't see them being able to stop Mahomes again. Where their defense is not very good. They kind of just Mahomes drops maybe 40 points on them. And then look who they have next. They have MVP Lamar Jackson on the offense that could even contend with the Chiefs offense. And once again, they get run over. Another tough loss against a team that just they can't handle. And then
This is a rough stretch right here.
Yeah,
For sure.
they go into Pittsburgh, hostile environment, and I don't see them being able to pull it out. They lose that with another loss at home to Minnesota. So I see them starting on 4 against a brutal stretch. And a fun fact, only one team ever has made the playoffs after starting 0-4. It was the 1992 San Diego Chargers.
Mm-hmm.
So they're in a very tough position. I mean, the schedule is not as difficult through the rest of the stretch, the rest of the way. But it's still a tough way to start. But they get the game against the Jaguars has a common theme of our videos has been beating up on the Jaguars. They're not a very good team. So they come out with a win there. And again, 2 more hard games for them as they go into Tennessee. And it's just, I don't see them being able to pull it out. They haven't really been able to gain any momentum. I mean, they beat the Jaguars, but they've just been struggling. Titans have a good defense, and they lose that game. And then at home against the Packers, again, I haven't been able to see them gain any momentum as they just have very tough moments. And they lose at home to the Packers, sitting at 1-6. Very, very tough spot. But then the schedule starts to lighten up a little bit. They get the Jaguars again, and they beat the Jaguars again. And then you see them looking to try to get Trevor Lawrence in the draft. So they're not going to be trying to win games, and the Texans take advantage. So right now they're sitting at 2-6 with their 2-0 against the Jaguars, 1-6 against the rest of the NFL. But I see them; they're finally able to get some momentum. They go up against the Browns. They're in Cleveland, but I see them finally kind of gaining some momentum. They beat Cleveland, and then they have the Patriots at home. And the Texans' offense and the Patriots' defense are both the strong suits of these teams, and both sides of the ball for the opposing team are kind of questionable. And I just see the Texans being able to pull it out. Sean Watson had one of his magical games, and they kind of ride the wave here. And then they hit Thanksgiving. Thursday day game against Detroit is tough on a short week. And Lions are accustomed to playing on Thanksgiving. They're used to the short week, and I see the Lions being able to beat them in Detroit. And then they have a divisional game at home. They come back to beat the Colts. And then they have a couple games here. They're sitting at 5. They're sitting at 5-8, so they kind of need a big stretch here to kind of make a playoff push. And I don't see it happening. I see the Bears defense kind of locking down on the Texans offense, and the Texans defense is in kind of struggles. Even though we're not sure who's going to be the quarterback for the Bears, but I don't see the Texans pulling it out. And then they go in Indianapolis. They played the Colts 2 weeks ago. They won at home, and divisional matchup's tough, especially after beating them the first time. They lose, and they go and beat the Bengals. And I see them kind of finishing strong here, as they do beat the Titans at home in the final game. But it's still not enough and they finish at 7-9, a step back from where they have been the last couple of years. And I don't see them being able to recover from the loss of DeAndre Hopkins on offense. And their defense is still questionable, and it's just I don't. They were a playoff team last year, last couple years. That I see their losses being more than their gains, and they take a step back and finish 7-9.
Just say a quick thing. I know Tyler wants to say something too. That first half is brutal, and it's a good thing that they have an easy schedule the second half, because it's the only thing that's keeping them from being a 4-12 team is that they win 5 out of their 8 games in the second half. And yeah, you said it best, how Hopkins is going to be a big loss, and David Johnson is a huge question mark, and we don't think that they can make the playoffs this year. Even with the extra 7 seed, their defense is not where it needs to be, and their offense have lost a big weapon. So, Tyler, I know you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting actually to see how David Johnson performs. The Texans, their running back last year was Carlos Hyde. They gave him a lot of carries, and David Johnson got hurt last year, and he kind of never was able to take that starting role back. And then I think in general, the Texans are just kind of a question mark. No one really knows how they're going to perform. And as Jake said, to start off that year with those first 4 games, just that's such a tough way to start off the year, especially I think they're probably going to lose all, if not 3 of them, if not all of them. So they won't have much confidence after going into their 5th game and past that. So that could really hurt them this year.
Going to the third and probably the favorite for this division in the Indianapolis Colts.
No.
I'm going to the third and probably the favorite for this division in the Indianapolis Colts.
So the Indianapolis Colts in the offseason, their really big acquisition was their signing of Phillip Rivers, and I think Phillip Rivers is really going to help this team. They drafted Michael Pittman, and they also drafted Jonathan Taylor, and I think these 2 are really just going to help solidify this offense as a possibly top 10 offense this year. Phil Rivers struggled the past couple of years on the Chargers, and he just had a really bad offensive line. And the Colts, their offensive line's probably one of their biggest strengths. So I think this extra time and extra protection is really going to allow Rivers to perform like he was previously. And he's got his deep target in T.Y. Hilton, and he's got a really good group of receivers. So I see this Colts offense really being good this year. And then on the defense, the Colts added DeForest Buckner to really try to help that defensive line. And they also added Xavier Rhodes, someone who kind of struggled the last year or 2, but he had previously been kind of a premier corner. So took a risk there, and it'll be interesting to see if he can help out their defense, who already has playmakers like Darius Leonard, as you see right here on schedule. They have Malik Hooker. So I think the Colts defense will definitely improve this year. To start off the season, the Colts have an easy game, as we've been saying. Jaguars are just not a very good team. I think it's a good way for Phillip Rivers to start off his career with the Colts, and that's a win. Week 2, it's a tough game against the Vikings. Dalvin Cook, I see kind of running all over this defensive line, which still is not going to be amazing. That's a loss. Week 3, the Jets. The Jets are going to be an interesting team this year. I think they will be definitely one of those underrated teams, but I think the Colts will pull out the win here. Week 4, it's another very winnable game. As Jake was saying before, the Bears kind of are iffy team this year, so I think that's going to be another win. Week 5, the Browns. The Browns are a capable team. I think this is a possible loss, but I'm going to give the Colts another win here. You notice they have a pretty easy schedule to start off the year, so I think it'll be good for the Colts and Phillip Rivers get their confidence up. And Week 6 is another win. Joe Burrow still getting used to that new offense. Still isn't the best quarterback, still kind of getting used to everything, so that's another win for the Colts. And then they have their bye, sitting at 5-1, really good place to be. Week 8, I think it's going to be another win against a Lions team who I think will be kind of underrated this year, but it's still going to be a win for the Colts. Then they kind of hit a tougher stretch against the Ravens. That's going to be a loss for me. The Colts kind of get humbled here, really confident, and the Ravens kind of just hand it to them, beat them by a pretty good margin. Week 10, I think it's going to be a win against the Titans. The Colts coming off a horrible loss. They give it all, and they're going to get the win against Derrick Henry and the Titans. And then week 11, I see as kind of a surprising win against the Packers. The Packers were a playoff team last year. They were a good team, but the Packers' defensive line was kind of one of their biggest weaknesses against the rush. And the Colts have Jonathan Taylor. They have Marlon Mack, and that's super good offensive line. So I think they just kind of run all over them and surprise the Packers. Week 12, it's going to be a loss for me. You know, as we said, division games, the division is so hard to sweep teams. So I think Derrick Henry has a really big game, and that's going to be a loss for the Colts. So coming off this loss to the Titans, I think it's going to be another loss to the Texans at the Texans, and the Colts kind of hit a little bit of a bump in the road. The Texans still have a good offense. You know, their defense isn't great, but the Colts defense isn't great either. So I think the Texans offense will be able to feast on the Colts defense, and that's a loss for the Colts. Week 14, this is kind of a surprising game. I'm going to give the Colts a loss here at the Raiders. John Gruden's kind of had the Colts number in the recent years, and I think it's kind of one of those games that the Colts just go in expecting to win, and they come out the loss. Week 15, the Colts get payback here. It's a win. As I mentioned, the Texans defense isn't great, and I think the Colts run all over the Texans defense and get that win. Week 16, Steelers, really tough team. That top-notch defense, I think, gets to Phillip Rivers, and that's going to be a loss. And then to end the year, really, really nice way to end the year, looking to get the division win. I think this is going to be a win against the Jacksonville Jaguars. As we mentioned, they're just not very good this year. So that gives the Colts a final record of 10-6. And then,
yeah, I just like to make an observation. Especially on the left side, the first half of the schedule is a very, very light chance to rack up wins against teams that have a lot of players there. And if they really like a high potential to go 7-1 even in that stretch.
yeah.
And it does get harder towards the back half, like a lot of divisional games. But I mean, overall, not a very difficult schedule for the Colts. And I'd like to offer a question. I mean, Phillip Rivers had a down year last year from his standards. He threw a lot of interceptions, but the Chargers did not have a great offensive line, and the Colts offensive line is better. But what other factors do you see? You see Phillip Rivers bounce back here. What other factors besides the O-line do you see helping Rivers bounce back?
You know, I think the O-line is a big part of it, as you mentioned. You know, Phil Rivers, he's a pocket passer. He just likes to stand in there, throw the ball. He can take hits. But obviously, an improved run game will help him also. He had a good run game on the Chargers, but the run game on the Colts I expect to be really good also with Marlon Mack, Jonathan Taylor. And then he has good receivers. He has Michael Pittman, T.Y. Hilton, Zach Pascal, Paris Campbell, and he also has a tight end, and he loves throwing to tight ends. Jack Doyle's a pretty underrated tight end in my mind. So I think he just has a lot of weapons around him, a lot of people to throw to, and that's going to help him succeed.
All right. So that's it. I think we're going to move on to our last and final team of the AFC South and the AFC in total, the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So we're now going to move on to our final AFC South team in the Jacksonville Jaguars.
All right, so the Jags are obviously not favored to do well. They are favored to finish in the bottom of the AFC South and the bottom of the NFL. Last year, they were carried by Minshew Mania, took the league by storm. So Yannick Ngakoue, he obviously wants out. He's their best player on offense, defense on their team. Big edge rusher, only at 25 years old, been in the league for a long time already, though. He wants out. He's been wanting out. There's a situation going on there, so who knows what's going to happen. Some key ads. They didn't have many ads or losses, but they added Tyler Eifert and Joe Schobert, and they lost Cody Davis. There's also a big question mark here with Jamal Adams because obviously he wants out of the Jets, and one of the places that he's been trade rumors you've been seeing are to the Jacksonville Jaguars because of Yannick Ngakoue. So we're going to start off week 1 against the Colts at home. I think they're going to pick up a loss here. You're going to see a trend of losses as we said before, they're not a very good team. And then we're going to travel to Tennessee for week 2 to face the Titans, and I think that's another loss. Week 3, primetime Thursday night game against the Dolphins. That's not a very good game, but I think they're going to make up a loss here against probably Tua, maybe in his first career start. So it's going to be interesting, Minshew versus Tua, but I think Dolphins are going to come away with this one. Now against the Bengals in Cincy, I think they're going to pick up their first win of the season in this game, week 4. They're going to start the season, the first quarter of the season, 1-3. So then in week 5, they're going to be traveling to Houston to face the Texans, who we've talked about them before, have had a really bad offseason. But even with all that, I still think they're a way better team than the Jaguars. That's a loss. Week 6 at home against the Lions, another struggling team. But I think the Jaguars are going to pick up a win in this one against the Lions at home. Week 8, they travel to Los Angeles, to face the Chargers. After a big win, I think they're going to be a little too far ahead of themselves, and they're going to lose this game against the Chargers. Now, right here is a vital point in the season, and you're going to see a bunch of losses in a row. Just a little heads up because it's a huge stretch for them, a lot of tough games against a lot of good teams. So they play Houston again, this time at home, and I think, again, they're going to lose. They're going to get swept. And then in week 10 against Green Bay, one of the toughest places to play on the road, it's another loss. Aaron Rodgers is going to overpower them. At home against the Steelers, this is when teams are starting to fight for the playoffs. That's going to be another loss. Against the Browns. Browns are going to be a nice and a gritty spot here as they also are fighting for the playoffs in their division. So that's another loss at home. Then in Minneapolis, another hard place to play. Another team that's fighting for a playoff spot. That's a loss. Week 14 at home against the Texans. That's another loss. This is when Derrick Henry really starts to pick up his strides, as I said earlier in this video. Week 15 at Baltimore, I think it's an obvious loss. There's no way Jacksonville at this point could beat Baltimore, especially in Baltimore. Only reason I could see it is if they're terribly injured, which I don't think they will be. Then week 16 at home, I actually think they're going to pick up a win in this one here. Break up the big losing streak, nothing to lose. Yeah, that's a win. And finishing off the year in Indianapolis, week 17, Colts are fighting for our division. They're going to pick up a loss here and finish out of a record of 3-13. Obviously, it's not a good record, but you also have Trevor Lawrence coming out of the draft this next year, Justin Fields, and I could see some games that I want to point out right now that could easily be flipped either way. So Dolphins, Jaguars could win that game, bring them to 4 wins. They could win, sneak in a win against the Texans. That's another game that could possibly go either way. They could also lose a game to the Lions or the Bengals, or quite possibly and probably actually against the Bears. So it could be anywhere from 2-14 to 4-12.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think the win against the Lions, I don't see them winning that game. I think the Lions are a decent team.
Anything else?
Just that they're just not a very good team, and I agree they're definitely not gonna eclipse 4 or 5 wins. They're just gonna be a bargain bin team, and many say they're tanking for Trevor, as Trevor Lawrence is seen to be one of the best QB prospects in a long time, and Jaguars need a quarterback, so kind of a perfect match.
Moving on to the AFC South standings. In first place, we have the Indianapolis Colts at 10-6. Then in second place, the Titans at 9-7 for the 5th straight year. The Texans coming in at third at 7-9, and the Jaguars in fourth at 3-13. Not a very strong division here.
No.
That does it with the AFC South standing predictions. Now we're going to be moving on to the entire AFC playoff predictions from our previous prediction videos.
So starting off our playoff picture, we have the 4 division leaders. So with the number 1 seed, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, who earn the coveted only bye, as with the addition of the 7th playoff team, only the 1st seed gets a bye in this year's playoffs, which makes it a huge deal. And we consensusly agreed that the Chiefs beat the Ravens in their head-to-head matchup, which earned them the tiebreaker and the lone bye. And like I mentioned, the Ravens fall to the 2nd seed at 12-4. And then the other 2 division leaders, the 3 seed Buffalo Bills out of the AFC East, finished 10-6, and the Colts out of the AFC South also finished 10-6, get the 4 seed.
Then moving on to the wild card, the Broncos have the 5 seed at 10-6. We said they were kind of a sleeper team this year. And then with the 6 seed, the Steelers also finished with a record of 10-6. The Broncos won the tiebreaker over the Steelers with the overall wins in the AFC. And then to wrap up with the 7th seed are the Tennessee Titans at a 9-7 record.
So some of the teams in the hunt, or the teams that just missed out, are the Chargers, who fell in the tiebreaker to the Tennessee Titans as they had a weaker in-conference record, which left them just outside the playoff picture. And the 2 other teams that just missed the playoffs were the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets at 8-8. Both 2 teams have pretty bad reputations recently and are both kind of in a similar position, middle of the pack. And that finishes our playoff picture for the AFC this year based on our predictions.
Yeah, I think some of these teams in the hunt, though, definitely could easily make the playoffs. I think the Jets just have a tough schedule this year, and I think the Browns and Chargers could definitely jump into one of those playoff spots.
For sure.
Thank you for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and check out our other 2 videos where we went over the AFC North, AFC West, and AFC East for our next episode, where we'll be going over the game-by-game predictions for the NFC West.